The memory of the first night still hums under the skin like a secret song. It began with a glance that lasted one heartbeat too long, a spark held between two strangers who were not supposed to burn. The room was full of people and polite conversation, but there was a silent corridor carved only for two eyes speaking in a language that felt older than rules. That glance turned into a question, a dare, a promise that neither could explain and both wanted to follow. No declarations, no scripts, just a gravitational pull drawing two bodies closer than common sense would allow. There was a door that should have stayed shut, and yet fingers found the handle. The lock clicked behind, the world went quiet, and the air grew warmer with what had been denied too long. The distance closed in hesitant steps, then hesitation disappeared. Lips met like they had always been meant to align. That first kiss was not gentle. It was relief and risk and hunger. It tasted like danger dressed as freedom, like something stolen that suddenly belonged more than anything else. Hands learned each other's geography, the kind that maps can't show, the kind that lives in heat and breath and the trembling edge of surrender. Nights became a hidden country. The sun belonged to other versions of life. Moonlight belonged to this truth. Shadows turned into shelter, a quiet apartment, a borrowed hotel room, a car parked under an indifferent sky. Wherever secrecy could hold, love unfolded anyway, impatient, breathless, shameless in its certainty. Every touch was a bridge built over the ravine of fear. Every kiss said, "Still here." Every sigh said, "Don't stop." There was always a moment right before skin met skin, where the world seemed to wait, like a held note, and then there was that soft, inevitable fall. Bodies learned to speak in murmurs and insistence. They argued in whispers and forgave with hands intertwined tighter than vows. The risk of it became part of the rhythm, a message sent at midnight, a door opened on tiptoe. The hush of laughter behind closed curtains, the delicious sting of almost being discovered and not caring, because the pull was stronger than the rules. The forbidden quality didn't cheapen anything. It sharpened it, carved the shape of desire into something precise and undeniable. The heart pounded not just from the closeness, but from the knowing. This was not a game, and that was the most dangerous thing. A game ends. This felt like the beginning of a forever that refused to ask permission. Every night, layers fell away. Not clothes first, but defenses, fear of being seen, fear of not being enough, fear of wanting too much. Emotion arrived before the body could keep up with it, heavy and bright, a flood that filled all the quiet rooms inside. The intimacy didn't begin in the bed. It started in the pause after a laugh, the breath shared after a kiss, the silence that felt like safety instead of emptiness. Hands learned to ask as much as take. Mouths learned to listen as much as taste. The heat of it soothed aches older than memory, turned the ache itself into a way to feel alive. There were nights where passion burned so fiercely it broke into tenderness, where roughness softened into reverence, where the body became a cathedral and every touch was a prayer said without words. The sheets held stories that would never be told and didn't need to be. The skin remembered them all. There was the moment after, always. The quiet, the drowsy candle of breath. The way fingers traced lines along arms and shoulders and collarbones, as if signing a contract no one else would ever read. There was the way a heartbeat slowed beneath a palm, saying stay, saying trust me, saying you're safe here. Secrecy can corrode or it can teach. In those nights, it taught how to be careful with a treasure. To show up when it mattered, to hold a gaze and not flinch, to be brave enough to want more than permission gives. It taught that desire without devotion is only noise, and that devotion without desire is only duty. Here in this hidden country, both sang together, fierce, honest, unafraid of its own echo. The body promised what the heart already knew. This wasn't temporary, not a fling, not an accident, not something to dust off and forget when morning came. Mornings were the test, sunlight sliding under blinds, the scent of coffee becoming a ritual, the quiet that made everything real, a forehead pressed to a shoulder, a smile half asleep and unguarded, a simple good morning that sounded like home. The world was still out there, full of questions and consequences, but inside these thin walls there was an answer. In the quiet light, there was a certainty that the night before wasn't just heat, it was truth. The touch carried tenderness that could not be faked. The kiss held patience, not just hunger. The embrace felt like a promise, not a pause. Danger remained, but it transformed. No longer the fear of getting caught, but the fear of losing what had been found. Hearts that had been careful learned to be courageous. If anyone had asked why continue when the stakes were so high, the answer would have been a simple one, because love had already chosen. Desire had opened the door. Love bolted it from the inside and said, "Mine." The forbidden frame made the picture more vivid, not less. Boundaries that once felt like walls turned into the border of a sanctuary built by two steady hands. There were nights that were soft as rain, and nights that crackled like a storm. There were confessions, not grand, just honest, the kind that take courage to say and gentleness to hear. There was laughter that dissolved a day's worth of weight. There were arguments that proved closeness doesn't always feel sweet, and reconciliations that tasted like honey on a wound. There was the joy of learning tiny details, how a breath changes when a kiss lands just right, how a shoulder stiffens before a story about old pain, how the eyes brighten when trust is received without question. These details became a private language, a dictionary of devotion compiled line by tender line. Desire stayed, but it matured. It learned to wait, to savor, to return. It learned the contours of patience and the sharp edges of need. It learned that the most intoxicating part of a night wasn't the rush but the recognition. The moment of looking across the room and seeing a whole life shining back in the other's eyes. Nights of secrecy didn't shrink the love, they distilled it. They made it strong enough to breathe in daylight, bold enough to stand where anyone could see, if the world ever demanded honesty. But even if the world never asked, the love had already answered itself. No one can legislate chemistry. No one can outlaw gravity. When two souls lock into place, the universe shrugs at paperwork. So the nights continued, each one adding a stitch to a tapestry that could not have been woven any other way. The passion remained a bridge, not an escape route. It carried the weight of truth across the river of doubt and delivered it safely, over and over again. The more the body gave, the more the heart returned, and the more the heart returned, the more the body learned how to love without flinching. The danger that once felt like an enemy turned into a mirror, showing what mattered most. If love could survive the hush and the shadows, it could survive anything. The secret became less about hiding and more about honoring, less about prohibition and more about protection. There are loves that arrive quietly and loves that arrive with thunder. This one cracked open the night and lit it from within. It asked for everything and offered everything back. It refused to be small, even when kept in rooms with locked doors and whispered names. Here is what the nights taught, finally. Passion isn't a thief when it brings the heart home. The forbidden was only a word. The devotion underneath it was a world. And somewhere between a first reckless kiss and a last lingering embrace before dawn, forever began. The first brush of contact carried enough heat to strip away hesitation, a collision of bodies in the half, light where every whisper sounded like a secret vow. The space between breaths grew smaller until it vanished completely, replaced by the rhythm of need that drowned out doubt. Shadows clung to the walls, but they could not hide the urgency that burned hotter than fear, an urgency that demanded to be felt more than explained. Lips found lips, not gently but desperately, as though one more second apart might extinguish something too fragile and too fierce to risk losing. The weight of the world beyond the locked door faded, leaving only the pull of flesh against flesh, hearts hammering like fists against glass. Desire wrote itself in the way fingers curled, in the sharp intake of air when touch slid lower, in the unspoken plea to keep going, not to let go. It was more than heat. It was surrender disguised as fire, a surrender that did not weaken but bound tighter. The body became a language, each movement a word, each shiver a sentence, each climax a declaration carved into memory. Even in the stillness after, the intimacy refused to dissolve. Skin clung to skin, sweat traced lines like rivers joining at the sea, and silence hummed with the echo of what had just been shared. Eyes stayed locked long after the urgency had passed, carrying the weight of something deeper than lust. It was in those moments that the truth revealed itself. Desire was only the spark, but what burned brighter was the certainty of connection, unshakable and infinite. And so the nights continued, each one more consuming than the last, until fear no longer mattered. The heat of those embraces became a sanctuary, the shadows a cathedral where devotion was worshipped in every touch. What began as stolen moments of forbidden passion grew into a fire that could not be smothered, a love story etched not in words but in the trembling edges of two souls colliding and refusing to break apart. Forever began in that heat, and it never let go. Every hidden kiss carried a weight that no words could hold, a gravity that pulled the heart deeper each time lips met in the silence of secrecy. What began as desire, as stolen moments of fire and skin, slowly shifted into something heavier, something that reached beyond the body and anchored itself in the soul. Each kiss felt like an awakening, like the uncovering of a truth that had always been there but had been waiting for the courage to surface. There was passion, yes, fierce and consuming, but there was also a tenderness in every stolen embrace that whispered of something impossible to deny. The nights no longer felt like escapes. They became sanctuaries. Within them, laughter mixed with sighs, heat tangled with gentleness, and silence became a language that spoke louder than desire alone. The body still craved with an urgency that could set the air on fire, but beneath the urgency grew a rhythm of care, of patience, of discovery that had nothing to do with lust alone. Fingers no longer touched only to take. They lingered to understand, to learn the shape of trust and the warmth of being fully seen. Eyes no longer closed only to drown in pleasure. They opened wide to drink in the reality of another soul reflected back. Every hidden kiss became a confession, not of sin but of devotion. In the shadows, truth spilled more freely than daylight ever allowed. Fear that once lingered in the edges of the room slowly dissolved as certainty grew stronger. The body gave, but the heart gave more, and with every giving, the bond tightened, invisible but undeniable. Desire became devotion, lust became loyalty, and the fire that had first burned recklessly began to glow steady, unshakable, eternal. There were moments when the world outside seemed to press hard, when the weight of what could not be spoken aloud threatened to crush the fragile walls of secrecy. Yet each kiss, each embrace, each night spent wrapped in breath and warmth rebuilt the foundation, stronger each time. The more the outside tried to make it impossible, the more the inside carved out a truth that nothing could erase. The intimacy no longer belonged to shadows, it belonged to eternity. What began with the hunger of lips grew into the quiet knowing of hearts. Every laugh shared between kisses, every tear brushed away with gentle fingers, every whispered "I need you" in the dark stitched two souls together until separation no longer felt like a choice, but like tearing the sky from the earth. The fire of desire still burned, but it burned differently now, not wild and uncontrolled, but steady, guiding, illuminating a path neither had seen before. The body still remembered the thrill of urgency, but it remembered too the sweetness of slow touches, of kisses pressed not in haste, but in reverence. It remembered the comfort of resting against a heartbeat that matched its own, the quiet bliss of falling asleep in arms that promised to stay, no matter how the world raged outside. The awakening was not only of passion but of love, of something so deep it could not be hidden, no matter how well the nights tried to cover it. Every kiss carved away the boundaries between want and need. What once felt like indulgence became survival. What once felt like escape became home. The more the lips met, the more the souls intertwined, until the line between two lives blurred into one unbroken story. And even in the spaces between, even when apart, the memory of those kisses lingered like a pulse, constant and undeniable, reminding that love had taken root in a place far beyond desire. The awakening was not sudden, but it was certain. It was the slow realization that what was being built was not just a series of nights but a forever. It was the recognition that the fire of bodies had always been only the doorway, and what waited beyond that doorway was a connection so deep it could never be extinguished. The lips had taught the heart how to open, and the heart had taught the soul how to stay. The kisses were no longer just moments. They were promises, promises written not in ink, but in touch, sealed not by law, but by devotion. And every time lips met, the promise renewed itself, stronger, truer, deeper than before. The world might have called it forbidden, might have called it reckless, but within those moments of heat and tenderness, it was clear. This was not fleeting. This was not passing. This was love in its truest form, awakened from the ashes of desire and born into the eternity of connection. Forever does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it comes quietly, hidden in the softness of lips meeting in the dark. Sometimes it blooms in the heat of passion that transforms into devotion, and sometimes it reveals itself in the simple certainty that no matter what the world says, no matter what the night hides, no matter what the day demands, the love has already grown roots too deep to ever be torn away. Every kiss awakened more than the body. It awakened the soul, and in that awakening, forever was found. It began in silence, a hunger hidden behind glances that lingered too long, touches that pretended to be accidents, words that carried too much weight for casual conversation. At first, it was nothing more than stolen moments, the kind that made the heart race but left the mind trembling with guilt. The passion was sharp, intoxicating, reckless. Every kiss tasted of danger. Every embrace carried the thrill of knowing it should not be happening. Yet it did, again and again, until secrecy became its own kind of truth. Those early nights burned hot, reckless like fire thrown onto dry wood. The heat of it left no room for thought, no time for questions. Bodies collided like waves against cliffs, crashing, breaking, yet always returning, unable to resist the pull. Each kiss felt like drowning and breathing at the same time. Each touch was both sin and salvation. There was no denying the power of it, even when daylight demanded denial. What should have been fleeting became essential. What should have ended after one night stretched into another, and then another, until it was impossible to imagine stopping. But passion, no matter how wild, does not stay untouched by the heart. Slowly, almost without noticing, what lived in the shadows began to carry the weight of something greater. The fire did not burn out. It deepened, turned steadier, less reckless but more consuming. Desire transformed into devotion, lust into love. What began as a secret escape revealed itself to be something that could not be escaped at all. Every kiss no longer said just "I want you," but "I need you." Every embrace whispered not just "stay tonight," but "stay always." The fear of being discovered, once sharp as a blade, began to fade under the certainty that this connection was not fragile. It was not something that could be broken by whispers or rules. It had already rooted itself too deeply. In quiet moments between the rush of passion, the tenderness revealed itself, a laugh shared in the dark, a hand held a little longer than necessary, eyes that searched and found safety in each other, even without words. That tenderness, that unspoken understanding, was what transformed everything. It was no longer about the thrill of secrecy. It was about the unshakable truth that had been uncovered in it. The story did not belong to the night anymore. It belonged to every moment, seen or unseen, spoken or unspoken. It belonged to the way hearts began to beat in rhythm, the way the world outside lost its power, the way separation felt like tearing something sacred in half. What had begun as a passion hidden in shadows became the light that guided every step forward. The love that grew was not delicate. It was fierce, unyielding, carved from fire and softened by devotion. It survived silence, it survived fear. It survived the weight of secrecy because it was never meant to be temporary. The more time passed, the clearer it became. This was not a story that would be forgotten. Too many nights had been spent whispering truths that could not be denied. Too many mornings had been greeted with the warmth of arms that promised safety. Too many tears had been caught by hands that refused to let go. Too many memories were etched into the very skin. Too many heartbeats carried in unison. Forgetting would have meant erasing a life already lived, a love already written into every breath. What began as passion became something unbreakable. Even when distance tried to interfere, even when silence threatened to grow between them, the bond held, because it was never only about touch. It was never only about bodies. It was about two souls that had found recognition in one another, two hearts that had decided, without permission, without explanation, that they belonged together. The world could not understand, but the world did not need to. The truth was written in every kiss, every embrace, every whispered promise, and so the story endured, not because it was easy, not because it was without pain, but because it was too powerful to vanish. It had grown beyond passion, beyond secrecy, into a forever that no one could take away. Love like this does not end. It does not fade. It carves itself into the soul, eternal, unshakable, unforgettable. Forever began where passion once lived, and it has never ended. If these stories have moved you, if the fire and tenderness have awakened something inside you, don't let it fade here. Subscribe and stay with me, because every new episode brings another confession, another secret, another truth about love too deep to hide. Like this video, share it with someone who believes in love that burns beyond fear, beyond limits, beyond time. And until the next story, carry this truth with you. Love that begins in shadows can still become forever.